Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going over Sentry. Now I know what you're thinking. There's a lot of PvP tunes to discuss. Why would you want to discuss Sentry? Well, it's because Sentry is still the second best PvP character in the game, and since Null is taking over, you guys must be thinking, what's an effective way to take down Nulls with your Sentry? Well, I'm going to show that to you today as we go through these matches. I'm going to take you in Otherworld Battle, I'm going to take you in high levels of AC, and this is going to be a full guide for him. And I'm going to be making a top 7 in PvP guide for all. So let's get into it. So Sentry, I'm going to be taking on the new meta teams and the old meta teams, so you get an idea of what he's like. And I'm only pairing him with Spider-Man and Invisible Woman to try to get the most showing out of him, because it's very easy to put 3 meta. It's not very easy to try to kill 3 characters with 1, or 2 characters with 1. So here I'm going to show you how to trigger the debuff removal. Right there, you can use a 4 as a high priority, and then a delay cancel into 2, and then you can follow it up with 5. You want to use 5 and 4 separately. Why? Because they carry debuffs. Sentry is something I like to call a debuff master. So when I call somebody a debuff master, that means that he could stun lock you for an entirety of the match, just so long as they don't have debuff removal, or you've triggered the passive early and you can get him similar to that. Now, fighting other sentries, you gotta be very swift. I do something called force canceling. So I force cancel my 2 to get the buffs, and I run away because I don't want to get caught in Sentry's debuffs or Sentry's super guard break, because he has super guard break on 3 to 4 skills. Because of that, he could, send opponents jerking around the entire match, even despite having guard break immunity. Sentry is one of the only characters that has super guard break immunity natively on his kit. Can't really find it listed because it's unlisted, but you could tell he has super guard break immunity under debuff removal, because, for example, sentries will be in the beginning and you'll be able to just casually run from the skill that clearly has and indicates super guard break in it. So you'll be able to see it more clearly after I take out this Wolverine. Wolverine is a true counter to Sentry. You have to use decoys to kind of weave around it. But as you can see there, I was debuffed and I got caught, but I use a force cancel of the 2 like I said before, and I follow it up with other skills, but I keep using that too as soon as Sentry comes to me. And you'll see here, I'm able to casually run away from Sentry's super guard break skill under the debuff removal leadership passive that he has, that he gives to all allies. The weakness, of course, of Sentry is that he overwrites it with his second skill, which is why I recommend playing on manual. And then on manual, you could constantly stay in this debuff removal by constantly canceling and force canceling his second skill. So you can even kill other sentries in 1 life. And the damage that I deal with a greed is highly recommended to use on him now, because Conquest was made for him to tank a lot of different opponents' skills, especially for autoplay. Greed, I highly recommend, because you'll be doing it on mostly manual play, and on autoplay, Sentry could still have the one-shot capabilities. And with Greed also, he could take on very hefty nulls and be a counter to some of them. So the way that I go about manual play and timeline battle is, you know, I'll just switch out of character just for decoys. I could still solo entire teams with Sentry, even null teams, even triple meta null teams, even double support nulls. I could take on brilliant Conquest Atoms. I could even dodge brilliant Greed Atoms with Sentry's well-timed second skill because it has very quick movement. There, I triggered the debuff removal with Spider-Man's fourth skill. So now, I'll be able to debuff null for about 8 to 10 seconds. And the rotation I use is mostly 2, cancel 5, cancel 3, delay cancel 4, cancel 2. Something like this. So I keep him in debuffs. And Null has the highest amount of debuff removal in a skill, but Null also overwrites his passive the fastest. So as soon as Null gets his passive again from getting debuffed by Sentry, he's going to overwrite it right away. So you'll have another 10 seconds to debuff him. I'm keeping both lives of Sentry so I'm able to do this. Against double support nulls, the other teammates that I have are going to be basically useless. They're going to be fodder. They are not going to kill double support null, even if it's a greed null. They're just not going to do it. They don't have the facilities to do that. But Sentry can do it in one life, as you saw. And since most of his skills have super guard break as well, there's other ways that you're preventing null from doing attacks. It's not just debuffs, it's also super guard break. You're knocking him back a lot with a lot of your skills. If they're well timed, you could even avoid getting killed. And I think that Sentry is still extremely efficient. He's easily my second best PvP toon by far. You know, like even well-built surfers can still struggle against well-built greed sentries. And you were seeing the way I was taking a lot of surfers on, especially in a triple meta in the beginning where I used 2 right away. And it triggers surfer's debuff removal lead, and he's going to overwrite it right away. On manual, you want to take advantage of characters like Null, Atom, Surfer, Sentries. All those guys overwrite their leadership of debuff removal with their own skills. On manual, you could capitalize on this and trigger it if you know where and how to trigger it. And you could essentially beat a lot of auto teams, even if they're extremely tough. Now, getting into high levels of timeline, I obviously recommend you have at least 16% Pierce or above. And if you are wondering whether Sentry can work with a tier 3, he can, just so long as he has that 16% Pierce at least, and he has Greed. But at tier 3, you definitely want to combine him with an offense support to bump up his damage to be like a tier 4, or you'd want to put him with triple meta. At tier 4, honestly, if you want and you play manual timeline, you could rock him solo. I rock him solo even with Spider-Man. I since changed Spider-Man to somebody like Ghost Rider, and the team is, it's very easy for me to use. So I'm giving you all of the secrets to fighting all different kinds of teams. Brilliant Conquest nulls, double support. Greed nulls with Sentry Colossus. Brilliant Conquest null, Brilliant Conquest Sentry, and Brilliant Conquest Wolverine together. They're all top Vibranium or Challenger teams, and if you know how to beat every opponent, it doesn't matter where they start. You know a lot of the secrets that I've shared with you that I'll go over again, right? The force canceling of the second skill, so you could run away and keep yourself in debuff removal. Sentry being a debuff master. Him having damage with Greed to one-shot and take out a lot of hefty opponents. If you know all of these strategies and you apply it, you should be able to effectively use Sentry in timeline battle today, even though there's clearly a overused tune in timeline battle that's, you know, Null arrived about a month ago, so I showcase all of the different ways to counter him in many different scenarios. It could be a double meta, or it could be a support with 2 meta. You could use my guidelines to take them on with just a solo Sentry with maybe like a top 10 meta. You want to use 4 and 5 separately. Sometimes you could time Sentry's reactivation of the leadership debuff removal passive. You could time it almost after every kill. You can also use decoys, like how I did there. You could keep yourself in iframes, or you could divert an iframe to buy time and switch to another character. There's a lot of different strategies you could use in timeline battle with Sentry on manual play. So keep that in mind and have fun with him. Just by this alone, I still believe that Sentry is worth the tier 4 still. And most teams that aren't double support null have Sentry in it because people know how good Sentry still is. Even with a non-recommended CTP like Conquest, people are regretting putting Conquest on Sentry. I think it could still work in the other parts of PvP like Otherworld Battle and AC, but I'm showcasing a Greed build because I highly recommend it. Now, of course, every build it's going to have some downsides. Downsides of a Greed Sentry is obviously that he could still be killed easily, so that's why I recommend playing a Sentry with Greed on manual. If you really want to rock him on auto and you still don't want to make him as fragile, you can always pair him with Colossus to fix that problem. There's a lot of different support team-ups you can make with Sentry to make him tanky, but in today's meta, it's important to pair him with another meta to help complement him, and so he can complement the other meta as well. I mean, playing kind of like with just Spider-Man as a meta, as a backup, is a bit risky. You don't have to do that. You could pair him with Wolverine, which is what many people do in timeline battle and in AC as well. So, you know, don't be afraid to do things like that. And the easier that you could trigger Null's debuff removal passes so he overwrites it, the better. Now I'm taking him into Otherworld Battle, and this week it was the first week of the season, so he is not debuffed. What's good about Sentry is that you could put him anywhere. You could put him first, you can put him third in the middle, or you could put him last, and oftentimes he will be the last one standing. And if he's removed everyone's debuffs, which he has on his second skill as well, he could debuff the entire team and wipe out the whole map. And he could do it when he's starting, and he can do it when he's finishing. So he also complements everybody else as well by debuffing them. And debuffing a large group is important in Otherworld Battle. It's a tactic that people wouldn't think to use, especially when Sentry is debuffed, but it's still critical to getting hits off of the opponent with your other characters. So Sentry debuffed is still one of the top choices in Otherworld Battle, despite, and usually the auto rotation is 2, 5, 2, 4. So Sentry, or 2, 3. So Sentry is usually in constant iframe rotation, and it's hard for him to get hit. And he's super guard breaking a lot of the time. So as you can see with a lot of these runs, even against really hefty meta, he's finishing them quite easily and quite consistently. I'm going to showcase to you debuffed playthroughs as well. And debuffed or not, he still proves to be one of my main damage dealers. I do think in certain instances in Otherworld Battle and AC, Conquest, particularly Brilliant Conquest, could be better than Greed in many cases, but you have to also keep in mind that Conquest isn't going to help you when Sentry is debuffed, whereas a Greed Sentry that's debuffed can still help you significantly. And in these runs, I'm taking on all kinds of different characters. Adam, Sentry, Null, even Jean, Surfer, Apocalypse, Madeline Pryor. I've taken on some Deadpools. I've taken on some Spider-Mans. I've taken on some Wolverines. You know, you're getting the whole batch here. And it's pretty much the same, like more or less. It's just where you place your Sentry. So if you place your Sentry in the beginning and he's not debuffed, you could have him take initial hits, tank, and kill the opponent. If you put him in the middle or in third place, you want to make sure he's in the center so he hits anyone in his proximity. If you want to put him last, you may want to put him into a far corner so he could creep up on meta and tackle them when they're attacking a different opponent. So there's a lot of different tactics to go about it, but unfortunately you can't manually control it. But you're seeing Sentry take out all different kinds of meta in different scenarios and different placements. So it's always good to know where these tactics can be utilized. Different buffs you can put on Sentry. You could put offensive or defensive buffs. I think that if you have an offensive build, you should maximize his offense. Or if you want, you could put an extra layer of removing all debuffs from all buffs, so he has multiple chances where he can remove all buffs from the target, even if the target has debuff removal from a passive like Invisible Woman or Strife. The good thing about Sentry in Otherworld Battle is that you actually don't need somebody like Invisible Woman or Strife to give him debuff removal. Why? Because he has constant debuff removal on his second skill. So that's why in the first week of the Otherworld Battle season, you'll see many people with revivers without somebody like Strife or Invisible Woman, because characters like Sentry, Surfer, Adam, like we discussed before, have debuff removal in their skill. that they could use in a very short period of time. So as you can see, Sentry stun locks with super guard break and debuffs, and he stays in iframes. So he's always going to be very useful in Otherworld battle, even if he's debuffed. I was also putting him up against niche meta like the Fantastic Four and Ghost Rider, and he was still debuffed and putting in a lot of work. When he's debuffed, you can put him first or last, and what he does is that he stays in iframes, he debuffs, and he removes all buffs with his second skill. So while debuffed, he's still a top choice. Meanwhile, I played against a new meta, Magic, and what happens is she uses the counter once to maybe get a kill, and then she just sits there and gets debuffed for the rest of the match. So she wasn't much of a counter in Otherworld battle, and outside of manual, she's not much of a counter in timeline. And Sentry debuff shows this. Now going on to AC, you're going to see situations like this where here comes a null with support and with carnage, and if you hurt them a little bit, in the next round you'll have a better chance to beat them. And this is Envy's team, the leader of Divine Alliance, and he showed me this really cool clip of Sentry taking down Null and Carnage team with the help of Wolverine. Sentry and Wolverine are a common team to use to take on Null teams. So if you wanted to try it for autoplay timeline battle with Colossus, Wolverine, and Sentry together, you can do that. Now, this is my run where I just fight a Thanos, and Sentry and Spider-Man took him out pretty quickly. Anybody that doesn't have a revive is going to get crushed by a Greed Sentry. I would say outside of Null, a Greed Sentry can take on any of the top 7 meta one-on-one. Now, if they're grouped together, you'd want to pair Sentry with another meta. The harder and more meta the team gets, the more likely you'd want to add another meta with Sentry. So, for example, against this Deadpool and Adam, this Adam had a brilliant conquest, and my Sentry just narrowly got defeated. However, I killed Adam once and I got rid of Deadpool. So while my team got eliminated, their team got eliminated as well. So for another time, I decided, okay, since I know this team has a brilliant conquest Adam and probably a brilliant conquest Deadpool, I'm going to add another meta team before my main meta team in Sentry to help and reduce their life, so I have a better chance of winning. On top of that, I added a better support in Colossus to finish the job, to help me finish. So these are just some tactics you can use in AC. Sometimes I like to rock Sentry solo. Sometimes I would like to rock him with a meta and support. It's really depending on the team you are fighting against. So as I moved up the AC ladder, as we got more and more into Challenger in AC, the teams were getting more and more difficult. So understand that my teams may work in timeline, but they may be slightly different from Alliance Conquest teams. While teams are a little bit more versatile in timeline battle for Sentry because you have more control, in AC it's very situational. So you may want to offload a bunch of meta on a region that's by the opposition starting point or on region 5, so you end up locking them and making it much harder for them to take the region over. And this is in high levels of AC. In lower levels of AC, you may use the same similar teams that I use to maybe occupy like an important region. But regardless, the teams are very situational, and you want to talk with your alliance members and let them know if you should put some meta versus something like a triple meta, because there's a big difference and a big distinction there. And of course, if you're noticing that the opposition put 2 meta and support or triple meta, that you may want to combat in the same fashion with a triple meta or with a double meta support. And Sentry can basically rock with anybody because he has a debuff removal lead, and debuff removal leads are still very important in Alliance Conquest. They're not so important in Otherworld Battle where no leaderships apply, but like Timeline Battle, you need debuff removal lead, and it's super important. But these are just the reasons why Sentry is still a top choice pick. He's easily number 2 meta PvP right now. And if you're wondering if he's worth the tier 4, the answer is yes. If you're wondering if you could rock him tier 3, the answer is yes, but under certain precautions. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to like and subscribe. More guides for the top 7 are on the way. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.